Sharing your views. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chuck.
And joining me now, as Senator Warner just previewed, is Republican Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. He, too, is also a member of the Intelligence Committee. Senator Lankford, welcome to Meet the Press, sir.
Good morning. You don't look a day over 60, honestly. I'm surprised you're there for 70 years.
Well, we're Benjamin Button here. We're growing older as we get younger. Let me ask you this. It's a similar question to what I asked Senator Warner. At what point are you concerned that the special counsel's investigation gets in the way of your investigation?
I'm actually not concerned about that at all. We have individual lanes. We have deconfliction that happens regularly. So they're focused on criminal investigations. We're focused on armchair quarterbacking, making sure every witness has been seen, every fact has been checked, and we're going through the policy aspects because long-term we have policy issues we have to discuss on how we handle elections, how we handle social media, how we're handling classified information, how that's getting out in the public sphere. Those are uniquely things that we will work on. The special counsel has things that he will uniquely work on as well.
About a month ago on MTP Daily, I asked you to define collusion. And you said it's an issue of did any American work with a foreign power to be able to influence our election? That's the key question that still has to be resolved. Right. The George Papadopoulos news and guilty plea on lying to the FBI and at least making contact with a Russian. At that point, do you look at that as attempted collusion?
What I look at that is actually no surprise in this. It's the Russians were reaching out trying to find some way to be able to influence it. The big challenge, as I mentioned even at that time, was an American reaching back and trying to be able to engage with that. That's something that George Papadopoulos told the FBI that he had not participated in, that obviously the Russians reached out to him. He seemed to reach back out to them and to say, okay, sure, I'd be very interested in that. Now, the next challenge is, did anyone else from the campaign do that? He was a volunteer. He was someone that seemed to advertise himself around the world as being more influential in the campaign than he actually was. And it looks like the Russians took the bait on that.
I got to ask you, I know you've been trying to get information out of both the National Security Advisor Mike Flynn and his son Mike Flynn Jr. What role do you believe Mike Flynn Jr. may play in this investigation?
Well, that's actually what we're going to try to ask and find out. We want to be engaged in all areas of that and ask both of them every question that we can possibly get out. At the end of this, as you and I have talked about before, a lot of Americans are going to say, did you ask this person this question? We want to make sure all that gets out.
Are they being cooperative?
I'm going to leave that up to the chairman and the vice chairman to be able to determine how cooperative they've been in coming in and out. But I would say there's a lot, as you know, with any investigation where we build a lot of information before you actually meet with the final principals, so you have the right questions to be able to ask at the right time.
I want to ask you about a group of House Republicans that's pushing for Bob Mueller's resignation. It's only 3 strong today, but given the narrative being pushed more aggressively than ever about Democrats needing to be investigated here, how concerned are you that Mueller's will be ousted before his work is done? Maybe the president is upset. Maybe it becomes some congressional resolution. Is that something that should be discussed?
That's not a threat at this point. Bob Mueller needs to be able to finish his investigation. The challenge of any investigation like this is how long it could go on and how broad it could be. Again, you go back to the Reagan administration, that special counsel was in place 6 years. They extended even past the Reagan administration being in office. We don't want to see that, but I do think Bob Mueller needs to be able to do his investigation, do it independently, stay in place, use the resources he has, and get finished as quickly as he can get finished as he gets to all the facts.
Do you think Congress needs to sort of codify his role to protect him?
No, I don't. And there's been a lot of back and forth to say at some point the president said he doesn't need to be there. I don't think that's the White House position. The White House has said over and over again they have no desire to be able to push him out. That shouldn't be an action of Congress as well. Let's let him finish his job.
I want to get your reaction to the president's frustration, I guess, that he can't order the Justice Department to do an investigation, or he can't order the FBI to do it. These attacks on the Justice Department, are they proper, and what is your reaction to it?
I think it's a natural reaction of a president who doesn't have a political background on it. I understand that full well. I don't either on that. But he's stepping in and saying, hey, that's not my role. They've got to do their job. We had similar conversations when President Obama addressed down the Supreme Court, when he made comments to the FCC, and the FCC was an independent body. So I think this is a natural reaction. Now, President Trump says it a little more blunt. President Obama was a little more nuanced, but he also spoke about independent agencies or talked about the court. So we'll allow the president to be the president.
I want to ask you about the Attorney General, though. At least one time he's been caught misleading under oath There's some questions about whether he did it a second time. I think that would be an argument for some trial lawyers to have. But on its face, it leads to be some misleading. How concerned are you about that?
I'm actually not concerned about it. Some of the statements about Jeff Sessions saying that he didn't know of anyone in the campaign, for George Papadopoulos to pop out during one of the foreign affairs committees that they had, that was this advisory group, and to say, hey, we should get access to the Russians. I have access to someone in March. I just don't think it's that big of an issue. Again, it was a volunteer group. It was something the campaign turned down. It was an individual that was a volunteer that made that comment. That's what we're looking for, is internal, within the machine, within the paid staff, as a strategic thing. Not did some Russian reach out to some volunteer on the campaign and that volunteer try to oversell their position. That is an issue the FBI needs to address, but we're looking for systemic issues.
I would quickly, just one question on the big tax bill, because you yourself have said there's going to be a lot more iterations of this that come out. Obviously, the Senate has to put out. But I'm curious, do you have a red line? You've been a big deficit hawk in the past. If this increases the debt, is that something you're comfortable with supporting, even if the debt is increased, given that you have been a pretty tough critic of increasing the debt in the past?
I'm actually not comfortable with increasing the debt. This is something that's been a behind-the-scenes conversation for a long time. It's one thing to be able to cut taxes. It's another thing to be able to say, how are we going to deal with our debt and deficit? So my main focus has been whatever economic growth model we put in place has to be reasonable to be able to do it. So if we cut taxes right now, we're expecting a 0.4% growth in the economy to be able to offset that. That's a pretty conservative estimate of economic growth. Our economy for the last 10 years has not grown above 2%, or above 3% a single year. We are stuck in a rut. We're going to have to bump the record player to be able to get something going on the economy again, and we want to be reasonable in our assumptions to do it.
So if this tax bill increases the debt too much, you're a no?
I am a no. I want to make sure that we have reasonable assumptions in the process for growth estimates.
All right. Senator James Lankford, Republican from Oklahoma, the state that hosted one of the craziest football games of the day yesterday. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate you.
It was a pretty amazing day.
Yeah, that's for sure.